All right, Sam, good morning. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me. I'll give you the floor. Why don't you introduce yourself? I know we were talking a little bit before we started recording here. I know you got your start, I guess, in your career and entrepreneurial journey kind of in medical device sales. So can you kind of talk about how that came to be?
Yeah, so first real job out of college, I was a supply chain analyst. I was 24 years old. And then I saw all the sales reps who were calling me trying to ask where the heart valves were. So I worked for a company called Edwards Life Science. They manufacture heart valves, stents, and I was the liaison to direct where all the heart valves went around the world. So I had sales reps calling me every single day saying, "Hey, I need these valves." So I was able to see the type of revenue that they were creating. I knew that translated into high generating income for them. So I wanted to deviate my career onto the sales side of medical device. So by the age of 25, I started selling as a W-2 for a company. Shortly thereafter, within 8 months, I realized there's an opportunity to create a holding company where you basically get to 1099 yourself to multiple different medical device companies. So an easy way to describe this to your audience: if Nike, Adidas, Reebok all came to you and said, "Sam, you can have all Southern California and Nevada for the geographic rights to sell our product into Macy's, Nordstrom's, all the big box names," you will have the ill will to go do so. So then I started doing that at the age of 26, all the way up to age 29, and still today, still have that model still running. But then I always like to think about how do I peel the onion layer back more and more. So if you start as a sales rep and then you go to the distributor, what's the next level of chain of command? It would be to start manufacturing your own product and having your own distribution from your own line. So then I went to Germany at the age of 29, saw how manufacturing medical devices really were, and then I decided to take a leap of faith to go and started creating my own medical device. So I started with surgical instrumentation, class 1 and class 2 devices, and then built a direct consumer surgical instrumentation business that now allows us to have national distribution rather than just geographic distribution of where I was located. So now we have a parallel model for a medical device company that allows distribution from manufacturers that we distribute for in a geographic area. At the same time, we have a medical device company that I own with my product called Surgical Republic, and we sell these directly nationwide.
Okay. Yeah, super interesting. I want to back up a bit, and I always find this interesting. So you mentioned you start as a supply chain analyst. I'm always interested how people after college land in that career. Why did you select supply chain analyst? Did you kind of just fall into that role and then obviously you've turned it into something pretty great, but how did it start?
I like weird niches. So I studied global supply chain in college, and I knew two things were really important. If you know how to automate and build systems, that's really important. And if you know how to sell those systems that you automate and build, you will have success in your life. So I had a good taste of being an analyst and understanding how global supply chain really worked from manufacturing to the end user. And then quickly thereafter, I got into sales and I developed my sales skills underneath someone else's pay, where someone was paying me to learn and teach other people how to go sell a medical device. And I was able to do that quite well. So then from then, I decided to combine those two features together in the sense that if I can take my supply chain experience, take my sales experience, and combine those two, I can go create a valuable company and be able to use those two assets in parallel to grow something massive. Um, so today,
Hmm.
we have large distribution for being able to do those. And I like to always think of this preface of this thing that we learned in high school called the standard deviation. So the standard deviation is the core and the distance of the core between one another, right? So if I started in supply chain and sales, how do I continue to just stay close to those two assets that I have and grow other things in parallel to that? So I think sometimes the best thing to do in your early stage career is find what's effortless for you, right? And what's effortless for you is if someone were to ask you, Connor, what do people think of you today? They're like, oh, this guy's a great podcast producer. He's a great person with people. So that's your skill set, right? So how do you build businesses or skills around that skill set to enable you to grow in your life? And that's what I just continue just to flourish in.
And was that always intentional when you graduated from college? It seemed like there was some foresight there where you said, "Okay, I'm just going to go into supply chain because I like systems and I want to learn." And did you already have the foresight of like, "Okay, I'm going to run my own company one day," or did it just happen naturally?
It just happened naturally. I grew up in a Middle Eastern family where the first thing they want you to do is just get a job, the most secure job, right? Or before getting a job, I played collegiate soccer. I tried to go play professional soccer as well. And a Middle Eastern family thinks that's a hobby. But for me, I really wanted to make it a passion and I wanted to make it a career. Obviously, I fell short on that. So I had an inflection point whether I was going to go play soccer for $800 a month at a second division team, or was I going to take this job as a supply chain analyst for a great Fortune 500 company? So at that point, I probably had $20 in my account by the age of 24, and I said, you know what, it's probably best I just hang up the boots and move forward and started creating a career in medical device. And then from that, it just happened naturally to start creating wealth and businesses throughout the journey.
Hmm. Was it a hard decision? It doesn't sound like it was that hard of a decision to hang up the soccer cleats. I mean, did that ever come into it from like a passion perspective, saying, "Oh, this has always been my dream, and I have to let it go," or were you like, there's not much upside here. I'm fine leaving it."
I love that you touch on that because the day that I decided to completely hang up the soccer boots, I was able to just switch my mind into going and striving into my business career. And that meant a lot to me, to be honest, because it showed a characteristic of myself where I was able to go and just light up a switch and just go all in on something else. And I knew if I'm able to have that characteristic to just go all in after you stop one thing and go all in on the next thing and be able to be super committed to go do so, I know that those characteristics will translate into something very special for the future. It was a very hard decision, but at the same token, you have a financial barrier in life sometimes where that will force you to make decisions. And that was definitely one of the inflection points in my life.
Yeah, super interesting. I'm curious too. Medical device sales. I would say the average person doesn't know a ton about it.
Yeah.
It seems as though it'd be a relatively technical space, right? You need to know the product and know how to sell it. Um, but I have a sales background as well. I know sales can be a relatively lucrative career. Would you say that anyone can be a medical device sales rep, or what kind of background or knowledge do you need to have going into it?
So medical device sales is definitely one of the most interesting jobs you could ever have in your life. There's not other many jobs where you get to see an actual patient be cut open and you are profiting off that, if you think about it, right? So how you have to present your products in that type of environment has to be in a very egalitarian manner, in the sense that when you are speaking to a physician, you are trying to sell a product that ultimately has to reverse their dream outcome, which their dream outcome means that they are taking your product and trusting your service and products that it will benefit the patient first and foremost, right? Without you trying to think from a monetarily perspective, from a selfish aspect, right? Very different than tech, very different than any other products and goods or CPG services out there. So I really had to train myself in a way that knowing what I'm selling right now always has to be about the patient and like being not selfish whatsoever throughout the entire period, because people will judge you based off the way you're trying to come off, how selfish you are by trying to close a sale, correct? So in a
Mhm.
space like medical device, it taught me so much of how to play the elegant dance between closing a sale and delaying the gratification for something much further in the future. So these physicians that you work with, so how it kind of works is you go and set up a meeting with a physician. The physician likes you and likes your product. He then gets approval to use a product in surgery. If he does get approval, there's recurring business from that. There are different echelons of surgeons who bring higher ticket items and values to the given business. For example, a lot of my focus was in brain and spine surgery, the top of the echelon, in my opinion, outside of cardiac surgery as well, for getting products sold into hospitals. So a surgeon, a lifetime value of a customer, can generate $1 million, $2 million for you and your business. So it's kind of scary to know that one person can generate that much money for you and your company, and honing that relationship in to a way that it always survives throughout any sort of issues that could happen along the way. Things happen, right? You miss something, you miss an implant, a tray, and there's a live patient on the table. And you have to think about that, how you can do that from a service aspect. So what has it taught me? Have impeccable service, have impeccable character, be able to speak in a very egalitarian manner to physicians, people, and making sure that you're coming off just as genuine as possible. And it's not always financially driven, because we all know the first thing that people think about in regard to medical device sales is, oh, that guy makes a lot of money, right? That person makes a lot of money. And there's a stigma around that, which is somewhat true. But at the same token, it's all about how you can care for that individual who's on the table, because that's the most important thing. And when you preface your business around that, you will have a compounding vehicle that you don't know what to do with.
And would you say that's how most physicians view it as well? I would imagine that selling to a physician is much different than a regular B2B sale, right? As you mentioned, someone's life is on the line, their well-being is on the line, like the stakes are a lot higher. So is that what you found with physicians for the most part?
Physicians are oddly observant, and I like that about them, because then it keeps me on my toes. And I think that's what allowed me to know that if I can sell in this medical device space, I have a feeling that I will do well outside of medical device. Because in my opinion, it's probably the hardest sell I've ever had to do. And I've sold outside of medical device and different things, but medical device is one of the things that, to convince a surgeon to use your product in surgery, they are constantly just observing you as a person to see how you're coming off, to see what type of financial interest do you have, whether it's just for yourself or are you actually looking to really benefit me and my practice. And it's very hard to bifurcate those two things, especially if you work at one of these big companies like Stryker, J&J, where these guys are just pounded with quotas every single year and trying to reach these numbers that are somewhat far-fetched. And then that hits an inflection point of compromising their integrity, right? And that's where I think some of these sales reps go down a path that doesn't serve them in a way that allows them to have a large compounding vehicle for them to grow, because they have to compensate for the companies that they're working for rather than compensating for themselves. In the sense, what I mean by that is I went independent for the mere fact that I am the customer to these manufacturers now, right? The doctor and the hospital are not their customers, because I'm the lubrication process to get them the business. First, you go work directly for a company, they don't look as a sales rep as the customer. They look at the hospital and the surgeon as a customer. So I think that's the biggest difference between working independently under your own distribution model versus working as a W-2 sales rep for someone else.
Yeah, and under your own distribution model, right, you get to pick the products. If you work for J&J, you're told you sell this product and it's the best. So you have the ability to evaluate products on your own and say, okay, this is the one based on my expertise that I think is the best and the best value and the best outcome, which gives you more control, right?
It's exactly true, right? So I have to be somewhat creative on who I want to partner with. And the most important thing that I look for in a company is just the ethical business transactions that we can have for the lifetime of the value. What I mean by that is, am I going to work with this company or this person for a day, or am I going to work with them for the next 10 years? And I've gone through a plethora of companies throughout my tenure of doing this, in the sense that I've worked with companies that had a great product, but poor people. And I realized that I would never do that again, because I'd rather work with a subpar product and fantastic people, because that will allow you to make sure that you are still thriving with that subpar product, because you have a team behind you who is always supportive, right? Mm-hmm. So, if you go work at Tesla, it's a great product, but everyone at Tesla was an absolute asshole to you at all times, it's going to be very hard to work at Tesla, right? No matter how good the product is. And you'll find a way to make the product better. But it's very hard to change your environment if you're in a toxic environment from the get-go.
Yeah, I like that theme of longevity. Would you say that's kind of a core tenet you're looking at when you're building businesses or selecting people to work with? Is like, I could sell this product for the next 10 years. I know the relationship is going well, as opposed to this product will make me the most money over the next year, but it's just not going to be long-term. Is that something you think about?
So everything in my life is revolving around longevity. Like my newsletter, my business that I work with, the real estate that I do, everything that I think about is how much longevity does this product or service or person have with me? Because if you can't work with that thing or that person for a day, that means you can't work with it for the next 20 years. What's the point of even engaging in that relationship from the get-go? Because all you're going to have to do is shut that down and then start something else new in the next year or two, which then you're basically starting from nothing, right? So if you can learn that from an early age, to know that you have to be able to derive a long amount of effort with what you're doing and knowing that this is going to be a process for years, not for months, not for days, but for years with whatever endeavor you're going to do and commit to that. Those are the opportunities that you should think about.
And how do you do that, right? Because it's something I've experienced, and I think it's just human nature where you think, okay, I want this to be done as quickly as possible. I want to make $1 million as quickly as possible because then I'll be happier. Then I'll have what I need. So, I mean, it's not innate in us to have that approach. So for you specifically, how were you able to learn to look at life and your ventures in that way?
So definitely, mistakes are what makes you as a human being, right? And I think at an early age, the one thing I focused on the most was how quickly can I make money? And I did that. And I was able to go and just find ways to go create income for myself and be able to put money away to the sense that allows me now to think a little bit with a more peripheral view of life. And it's the hardest thing to do at an early age without having a little bit of money or something in the bank, right? Because all you're trying to think about is the next current buck that you're trying to go and achieve. So if you can just find something that I call a honey hole, which means that you need to find good bees to go create honey for you in an environment that you know that you can go create your full cup of honey, and that honey will pour into another jar over time because you found a system that you can go and actually absolutely start compounding over time. So what I mean by that is whatever you're really good at doing today, go all in on it first. And when you go all in on that, money will come. I promise you money will come from that. It's very hard said than done, rather than trying to always think about what the next shiny object is. And everybody has that symptom when you're starting a new venture. But it's the most important thing is just doing something that's effortless to go create your first buck and then go look at what else is out there to complement the first thing that you just built.
What do you say to people that say I'm not good at anything? I slacked off in high school. I got bad grades. I'm not from a family that goes to college, or I don't have college to look forward to. I don't have skills. I don't have a support system. So where do they start?
I love that question because I hear that all the time. And I like to reflect to like my parents who came here in the 70s, knew no English, and then figured it out and created companies and businesses here. And I look at that as, I promise you, you are good at something. You're just not bringing it out of yourself. So if I were to go write down exactly what I did today and did that over the last month, there are repeatable systems that I just completed, right? So tracking those levels of completion based off of what you have done over the past month will show that what you're efficient at. And there's something to be made from that, right? Like if you know how to make a bed really, really well, or you know how to mow a lawn really, really well, and you think you're not good at anything, there's a cleaning service there for you to go create. There's actually a lawn service company that you can go create. And people don't think about those things because they think like, oh, those are just tasks and duties that I have to go do on a mundane basis. But what really is unique is that there is a business to be created from everything, right? We have lights right here being made. We have computer screens here. There's services. There's posts outside. There's a business from all that, right? It's just sometimes we have to open up our eyes to see like, hey, what am I using my daily life today that I can go create? And those are the things that will find you to make the most joy of your life by being able to identify those things.
Yeah, and would you say those types of things could even be used as stepping stones, right? Because again, you don't think about it, but if you start your own lawn care business, it's going to teach you discipline. It's going to teach you how to market. It's going to teach you customer service. It's going to teach you sales, which you then can apply to other maybe higher leverage ventures in the future. I mean, is that a good way to look at it as well? Is people think I'm just cutting lawns, like that's such grunt work, low level work, but there's really a lot more to it, right?
Exactly. The lawn care service individual who goes and mows 5 lawns today and then eventually starts creating an online business of being able to go mow multiple lawns. And then he teaches a course of how to help other people create a business around mowing lawns. And then that mowing lawn individual starts creating product around how to mow lawns with the best products. Right then and there, he's built 4 businesses. So you just have to think of the layers and stacking the rocks on top of each other to know that if you just start with something similar to myself, a sales rep, then went into distribution model, and then started manufacturing instrumentation. And now I created a holding company we're starting a fund around this to help medical professionals invest in our businesses and real estate. So all that came from within a 5-year period, all from just starting from somewhere, right? And then once you go master and complete A to B, then you can go to B to C. And just these micro goals are the most important things in life rather than setting up long-term goals, because if you can just go accomplish something very simplistic, meaning that I'm going to do this podcast once a week, I'm going to write a newsletter once a week, and you stay consistent with those barriers, you'll be very surprised what you can go accomplish in life.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on increased competition with the rise of the internet, right? Because, I've seen that online, hey, start a cleaning company, start a lawn business. It seems like the internet has created a lot of opportunity, but also ramped up competition as well. And I know you've mentioned you write a newsletter, right? I decided to start a podcast. When I started a podcast, I realized like, holy crap, everybody has a podcast, which is a little disheartening. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that or if you've reflected on that. I mean, how do you stand out amongst the increased competition that the internet creates?
All you need is 100 people to love you, not 1,000 people to like you. And if you understand that from a business model and you value each of those 100 customers to make them worth a lot of money, you can create a very big business from that. So it's not about quantity, it's about quality. And I learned that early on, that there are people out there on the internet who maybe have millions of followers, but how many people actually are engaging with what their service is that they're providing to their audience? So rather than looking at these vanity metrics all the time, can you start looking at how engaged your audience is? And even if it's 10 people, but those 10 people each have $50,000 checks that they're willing to write to you. Right then and there, what did you just create? A $5 million opportunity, right? So $500,000 opportunity, sorry. So that's what I mean. You want to make sure that you're understanding who your customer base is and how much they respect of what you're putting out there. And getting to know those people very well, there's little gems within that. If you can identify that early on, you'll be able to create a great business.
Could you maybe provide an example? I mean, would you say you do that within the medical device space, right? If you sell to some of the biggest surgeons or surgical groups in Southern California, I would imagine that's a large revenue opportunity for you. So is that an example of how you employ it in your businesses?
Yeah, early on. So in parallel, when I was building the medical device company, I was taking all those dividends and putting it in 2 places. I was putting it back in my business, or I was buying real estate, multifamily real estate here in Southern California. And what was cool about that is the few surgeons that I was working with at the time when I was 27 years old were taking notice of that. They're saying, "Oh, tell me about these opportunities that you're doing within real estate." I said, "Well, I buy some of these dilapidated buildings, I fix them up, I put tenants in there. Some are Airbnb, some are short-term rentals, some are mid-term rentals, some are long-term rentals. And we have this unique model to be able to go and scale this as a more of a passive real estate investment opportunity." Like, oh, that's unique. My next deal that I did, I explained the deal to one of the physicians I was working with. He got 3 physicians around the deal, and they invested in my deal, right? So just from a leveraged opportunity right there, people I was currently selling to, I lubricated another opportunity that was much more appealing to them, that would pay them dividends to go do so. And it turned out, a way for me to open up my eyes at saying, look at my existing customer base, how many times I can utilize them in ways for me to create more revenue for myself and for them now, right? So there's always a way to blue ocean the opportunity. And I'm sure you maybe know what the blue ocean is, but it's to find opportunities within the business that you're currently doing and trying to squeeze the juice as much as possible. Oftentimes we want to go so wide, and rather than going 2 inches wide and 10 feet deep, but there are always ways to squeeze the juice as much as possible. You just have to think in that fashion to be able to see if you've maximized all the opportunities.
Yeah, I think a good way to look at it is you say, okay, I want to just investing in multifamily properties is pretty is not blue ocean, but investing in multifamily opportunities with surgeons that you also sell medical equipment to is just more of a leveraged and niche opportunity, right? I would imagine these surgeons don't have many people they already know that are hitting them up and saying, hey, invest with me. You already have that rapport and trust, and therefore they're willing to give you, I would imagine, large sums of money.
You're exactly right. So it kind of goes back to the earlier part of the conversation of what's the core dividend between the standard deviation of what you're doing and the distance from the next thing. So I always go back to this core. Today, like a big part of my business, of the business that I've invested in and have today, I'm only an operator of one business, which is my medical device company. I have other businesses that I've invested in where there are operators in place who do a great job. But the main operations that I run today, I'm still a medical device entrepreneur with this distribution model and a direct consumer model for surgical instrumentation. From that, I'm creating a fund called MedVestor. MedVestor helps medical professionals invest in high quality real estate opportunities. So this current existing eco-based system that I have allows me to tap into that for higher leverage opportunities. So I'm always going back to the main core, right? And I think people should understand that you can go back to your main core of people and offer more services, more opportunities, more often than you think. And by doing so, you will have high leverage on every new venture that you start. See, an example that I see people always do is like you find a doctor saying, okay, well, I want to go buy a laundry mat. I'm like, well, how does that optimize your current core of what you're doing in your life? Like they're so far-fetched from each other. Unless you're doing laundry mat for medical professionals potentially and doing it for scrubs and gowns and so forth, right? But and niching down. I like to niche down a little bit more of going back to my core community and offering services and products because it just gives you more leverage on my time. It's the same system, same principles I can always go back to and be able to offer very unique, advantageous opportunities back to them.
Yeah, I think the laundromat example is interesting. And I think what a lot of people don't think through is just the pain or the time suck that would create for a physician or a surgeon. It's like, do you know how to run a laundromat? Do you know how to hire the people that will show up and run it? I mean, was that your recommendation in that scenario of advising against things like that? Is you can basically say, okay, the laundromat's going to make you a couple $100,000 more a year, but is it worth the pain, I guess, of running it? Right, it is something that people need to consider.
Yeah, like you're incurring debt of not just money, but also time of not knowing that asset. I had a buddy who's a great real estate agent, commercial real estate, and he wanted to go buy a laundromat. And I actually deviated him from not doing so because I said, hey, have you thought about you own multiple Airbnbs, you sell a lot of high quality Airbnbs as well. Why not just start a property management company that parallels your real estate agent license to go only focus on short term rental property management? And then that'll be a cash cow for you. Just go get the dividends from the property management fees to go manage those things because you're already doing it, right? So again, it's like you can start businesses from just exactly where you are today and going a couple steps to the right and starting another business that just fuels that main ecosystem. That's how you start building this holding company that everyone's doing today. You know, I think it's very odd when people have a holding company where none of the businesses correlate to one another. Nick Huber is a great example, which I like what he does, is he built a self-storage business where he owns, I think a million plus square feet of self-storage. And then he started buying other businesses that started fueling each other. So a virtual assistant business that were managing his self-storage. He got an SEO business that he started where he was creating SEO towards his self-storage. He started creating all these businesses that fueled his main ecosystem and then offering those services out to his audience that he created through Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram and so forth. From then he created a flywheel from that, right? So when you can create a flywheel around everything that just starts to connect with one another, you create this web where they all start to speak to one another. And that's how true business starts happening. It's not from just buying a car wash in New York and then you're buying, something in Florida that have nothing correlated to one another, right? I think it's much harder to manage those things. First, you're starting to streamline and using the same systems over and over again with the same team and SOPs that you've created.
Yeah, I like that. It kind of creates a distinct competitive advantage because you can say multifamily real estate is kind of a commoditized venture. It's you against the next guy. He has all the resources you do, but like you're creating a fund, you're bringing in surgeons, capital that way. I mean, it creates differentiation So is that a way that you, back to longevity, is that how you think about it? Is this is going to create longevity? It's going to create, it may not create outsized gains, but it's going to create sustainable long-term wealth. Is that how you're looking at it?
Exactly. I'm all about cheat codes and unfair advantage. And what I mean by that is we all have an unfair advantage, whether you think you do or don't, because your unfair advantage is usually around the people that you're surrounded to on a day-to-day basis and how to utilize those people to fuel any other new venture that you have. You got to make sure those people trust you and those people want to work with you. And if you have that asset behind you, which people are an asset, you'll be able to grow whatever you want, and you'll be able to outlast other people because you have a trusted ecosystem of people who really want to do business with you. I think that's what's really critical, is understand that does your community respect you? And I made it very clear to my physicians the things that I do outside of medical advice, and the ones that are really engaged in what I do are my biggest supporters, right? And whether I'm still servicing them in the operating room and my team is out there helping them, they now say they look at me as someone who's financially savvy to go find and lubricate other opportunities, and that builds our relationship even more, and that allows us to have stronger in our current business today. So, those are my pillars of life, right? Like I created a newsletter called The Four Pillars. It's called the 4 Pillar Friday, and it just talks about four things. And I was asked this by a mentor. He's like, "Hey, what are your pillars?" People hear about it on content pillars and so forth. I said, mine's health. Mine's the assets that I build. Mine's the knowledge that I want to incur and the relationships that I have. Those are the only things. If I just focus on those four things, I can go create something massive one day. And every week in my newsletter, I talk about all four of those things and how they can fuel whatever you want to do in your life. And I talk about it based off the current basis on what I'm doing in my week and how those four assets and those four pillars have really cultivated my next venture to be somewhat successful by utilizing what I've currently already built. So, in life, like you just want to identify your pillars as early as possible because that will make things a lot more effortless. And the whole point of life is to have as much leverage on your time. And the only way to do so is to be able to relinquish control to other people to help utilize the pillars that you've created, right? And if you can figure that out pretty early, you'll have good success in your life.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So the 4 pillars, did that come to be, or do you look at it as kind of building your personal brand, right? Alex Hormozy talks about how Joe Rogan talks about UFC, aliens, Bigfoot, and elk meat, right? And that's his brand. He talks about what he likes to talk about, and therefore he is the brand. Are you trying to build a personal brand as well through those 4 pillars?
You could say that. So I didn't make a single piece of content until probably 6 months ago, to be honest. And I looked at content and social media as somewhat negligence for a long time because I was so focused on just building myself and the business that I had today. But I wanted to see what's on the other side of it, right? And I was curious that if I were to go put some content out there and see what people thought about it, what type of inbound response I could get. You see people with high leverage, like Sahil Bloom is a good example, who created a mini agency based off of everything that he's built, right? He's a great example of going back to what business should you create based off what you've done. So he's done something quite unique in the sense that he built a personal brand. He's built a high gross revenue generating newsletter. He's built agencies around all the things that he's done in the sense now he has a newsletter agency. He has a personal brand agency. He has a website agency because his website is quite unique. And he continues to build these small service-based businesses that have probably 50-55% net margin on them that he puts operators in place. And then when he's putting his content out there and people are seeing that, they're saying, oh, these are the services that I'm using to allow me to have these businesses that bring me cash flow for my overall future, right? And I think that's what's quite unique is about the content space is business can be created based off what your audience wants to get back to you. And obviously his audience was very receptive to the stuff that he was putting out there. So he said, okay, let me try to offer these services to my existing audience. And that's high leverage opportunity because when he puts an operator in place and all he needs to focus on is putting content out there, he probably has the highest leverage on his time by anyone else I know right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 2 forms of leverage, right? A media and content have no cost for replication. I think labor's a little different, but if you get you've mentioned it multiple times, so maybe we can talk about this, but if you get the right operator in place and you're able to be hands off, yeah, I mean, talk about buying time back. Can you speak to how you find those high quality operators? And this is another theme I like about running a business as well, is you talk about medical device. So you need to sell the medical device, but you also need to run a subsequent internal recruiting sales channel to sell
Yep.
other people on why they should work for you. How do you
Yep.
approach that? Because I think in this day and age, I think that's even more difficult, right? Is finding the right people for the long term that will give you that leverage, give you that ROI.
Yeah, you hit on a very delicate subject in the sense that we live in a world today where solopreneurship is considered the most idealistic lifestyle out there. So, in my space of medical device, it's considered somewhat antiquated to use labor leverage in your business, correct? So, trying to find someone who's willing to drive to hospitals, speak to neuro cardiac surgeons every single day, sell very, I would say, complex products to brain surgeons, and then me finding a high net worth individual who can afford all those things on his life or her things on her life, and then being able to couple that with a salary that makes sense for them is a very complicated equation to solve for. So I think the type of leverage that you're looking for in your business today is actually not labor leverage. And take this from my advice. Like if I were to go back and build a medical device company again, I probably would not do it the way I did it today. I think it's becoming too difficult with what media has brought attention to. In the sense, people want to just have a solo life working remotely and be able to do this through some sort of online SaaS-based business is what a lot of people are deriving to. That's why the podcast industry has grown so much. It's why the newsletter industry has grown so much. It's because people want service-based businesses or SaaS-based businesses that allow them to scale their life. And, last time I checked, people didn't want to be in operating rooms for 6 or 7 hours, seeing a lot of blood and a lot of complex spine surgery. Nonetheless, what are the positives of this? As I say, all the negatives first is cancer, trauma, the healthcare industry is never going to go away. But who knows what might happen with, social media for the future, right? I mean, things get shut down. Who knows if TikTok gets shut down, people's accounts get shut down left and right. And if they're solely relying on some sort of media distribution or some sort of course they've built, and the next course becomes antiquated because someone else has built a better one, you are shit out of luck, right? Where I think I've built in a space where I like to diversify and create my own little S&P 500 of having a piece of each type of business in your life to allow yourself to have skin in the game in multiple facets, right? Why is the S&P 500 so valuable? Because it's comprised of multiple different companies that are considered the highest echelon today in what we invest in. So why don't you just create your own little version of that? Even if you're a direct sales rep of a company or you work as a W-2, think about your life as allocating 5 to 10% of your dividends into multiple different things to know that you're mitigating risk. I think in life, all you need is singles and doubles every single week. Be proud to have a triple every once in a while. And then when you get a home run, you should love having that, knowing that it's coming every quarter or half year. And then every once in a while, we hit a grand slam, maybe once a year as well. You do that over the next 10 to 20 years, 30 years of your life, you'll be a very successful person. So it's just in life, you have to understand whether you want to go and have constant grand slams every single day and know there's repercussions that can come with that. Or do you want to just have safe wins from A to B and continuously grow from there? And your life will be steady. You'll have good health. You will have good wealth. And you don't need to listen to all the noise of everyone creating these $100, $200 million companies all the time. I think that's where I think people need to focus on is just completing from A to B a lot quicker.
Yeah, it goes back to longevity and sustainability. And I think it comes back to like a personal awareness, right? Like everyone wants in their mind, they'd be like, oh yeah, I want a $100 million exit, but you need to ask yourself, how realistic is that? And I think you need to take a step back and say, hey, what would my ideal life look like? If, like you said, singles, doubles, I have the finances to fund the things, to basically buy my time back and fund the things that I want to do. And they don't need to be overly extravagant. And so is that part of your I don't know if you mentioned that as a pillar, but is financial frugality a pillar as well, or just sustainable cash flow and income? Or are you looking at it that way of like, hey, I'd rather have, I don't know what it is, 20, 30 grand coming in a month as opposed to shooting for that 50, $100 million valuation and trying to sell it. And there's a lot more risk that comes with that.
So I'm 31 today, right? I'm actually very young in my entrepreneurship journey, if you think about it. What I've done first, and I think I would recommend this to many people, is can you solve the most subacute problems in your life to allow yourself to start taking bigger swings? So by doing so, you refer to, I live in California, it's a very expensive state, it has high taxes. So what's the easiest thing to mitigate towards? A car payment and heavy gas and a mortgage or rent are some of the most expensive payments usually in someone's daily life. So how do we eliminate those things? So the first thing I did when I got into real estate is I started house hacking units, in the sense that I would live in a unit and rent out the others in a multifamily aspect, and then eliminate my mortgage expense. And I did that at the age of 27. And to this day, I still live in a triplex where I Airbnb the front unit. It's a super host status. And I Airbnb the back unit as well. That gives me cash flow to live here for free. So automatically day one, I am thinking very clearly from not having to pay some sort of extravagant mortgage, right? And then secondly, you drive an electric car. It's a lot cheaper than having gas, especially if you're in a place where gas is super expensive like California. Another caveat, right? So ultimately, right then and there, you are eliminating heavy expenditures out of your life to allow you to start taking some bigger swings, right? Oftentimes, people want to go take the biggest swing possible when they haven't solved what's in front of them today that is causing them duress in their life. And you have to bifurcate those two things. And I think now at the age of 31, I'm like, I've solved for a lot of the things that were causing acuities in my life to now allow myself to go and chase bigger opportunities. So first and foremost, I would say I am chasing the $100 million thing. I'm creating a fund that is buying a lot of real estate. It's buying businesses under this holdco model. So we're helping medical professionals invest in real estate. That's the real estate side. I have a holdco called S&P Ventures where we buy and build businesses as well. Those are my portfolios that hopefully will allow me to scale to that 10-year of $100 million at some point, right? But the reason why I'm doing this today now at the age of 31 is I've made sure I'm in a position to go do so. And I'm very big on having good mental health to be able to take on any sort of new challenge, because we all know, like, our next venture, we don't really have a starting point when that should be. Whether you're trying to have a baby, whether you're trying to get married, we always think it's never the good time. But what I can tell you is that if you try to clear your plate as much as possible and keep that plate as clear throughout the journey, and when you're starting to start something new and knowing you're ready for it, it makes things a lot easier to take bigger swings. And I think at this point right now, I'm like, okay, I'm ready to take a big swing right now because I've already put all the things that I've built and automated those systems to now foresee a larger leverage opportunity in front of me.
And how did it come for you to be able to do this? Like, it seems like you have so many frameworks put together. Is this just years of hard work and it naturally happens? Like, I think many people would view this podcast and say, wow, he knows his stuff. He knows what he's doing. How did this happen? Is it just years of taking those small swings and discipline? Is that it? Is that kind of the path someone else could follow?
Connor, you mentioned a really good point there. So as you complete something and you look at it and say that was an accomplishment, you have to write down how you're able to do that. Why was that an accomplishment? So I think the easiest way is to build SOPs for your life and then understanding how to relinquish control for the next venture. So today, I think I can go probably buy another multifamily unit, underwrite the deal, relinquish control to someone else to go manage all the construction, and be very minimally involved in that today if I wanted to go do that. And I think that's what allows me to have scale. The thing about entrepreneurship and being a founder is knowing how you relinquish control, because you want to have multiple layers and chains of command to make sure you're focused on one thing: decision making, right? You at one point you start as a doer. You are doing the work, and you're being paid for doing the work. Now you want to be paid for what decisions you make, and the only way by doing so is in knowing what people you're going to put in place to go make those decisions for you, or the doers, right? And you are only speaking to less people throughout your tenure to make sure those things start to happen. I think that's where a lot of my focus is today, right? Even now when I'm looking at buying a business or taking down some more real estate and trying to grow the operation, I'm not trying to get in the nitty gritty anymore. I want to look at things from a macro perspective and then knowing who's going to be the operator in place and the best person to go execute upon that.
Yeah. I think a good way to look at it is working on the business as opposed to in the business. Is that something you relate to? And I don't know if you mentioned this. How are you picking operators, right? I think you mentioned, hey, everybody kind of these days wants to do their own thing. They want to have their own following, their own personal brand, their own solopreneur junior journey. So how do you approach someone and say, hey, I want you to manage this Airbnb for me or this multifamily property when they have this pull of other opportunities, other shiny objects out there for them?
Yeah, I think the best way to find an operator is to let them see the vision of what you're trying to build. And the first thing that I look at when I find an operator is not their skill set, it's what their ethics look like. And if you can start understanding ethics before operational skills, you will have that person for the long term. And then you creating that vision for them and showing what the opportunity is here will allow them to want to stick around for a long time. Because the ultimate thing that you're trying to build is for someone to stick with you and be a soldier with you for the lifetime of your business, the lifetime of your life, right? That's the goal. And if you can build your businesses around that premise, where you're creating the starting 11 that is going to last for the next 20 years, you'll be in business for a very long time. What are the average rates of people failing business on year one, year two? I know it's around 50%, even higher on year two. It's because I think there's a lot of churn out there. So minimizing churn as much as possible is something I really focus on.
And okay, you mentioned vision. Is there anything else? Is it how you make them feel even more so in a respect thing, more so than even like the financial opportunity? Like, hey, I respect Sam. I view him as an equal, even as a friend, and therefore I'm willing to go to battle with him. Is that part of it as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, the person making 15, $20 an hour to the person who's getting paid a $200,000 salary should be treated the same. And when they feel that they're part of that community that you're trying to build, they're going to want to go grow with you. You want to find someone who wants to go kill for you. A true killer out there are the people that you want on your team. But how do you make them want to go kill for you? It's basically how you communicate back to them on where you feel they are growing within your business. So if they feel neglected, they will not grow your business. Even if it's a janitor at your place, if you don't acknowledge how well he's cleaning your unit today, he will not want to go work for you for a long time if he was a direct employee for you. So just acknowledging those little things goes so long in the tenure of wanting to grow something massive. So I think the most important thing is like, can you understand the relationships that you're building within your community? One of the pillars of my life, right? And making
Hmm.
those relationships so profound to make them feel like, God, this guy Sam and this guy Connor are really genuine to what I'm doing, with the work I'm doing right now. Even if it's a low leverage task, they are greatly appreciating the work that I'm doing. Those little things just go so far in business.
Yeah, it's a really important point, and I think I think you may have mentioned that you started as a W-2 for a really big company. I just think it's interesting the attitude sometimes of employees at really large corporations, and how employees can either be a real drag on a company and how productive and efficient it is, or really take it to the next level. Because I don't know, I've seen, there are just employees where there's just apathy of, hey, I work for this really big company. I don't have any equity. I'm just here cashing a check. I'll get around to doing my work when I get around to it. I don't know. It's just interesting. I feel like it's one of the biggest problems that even a mid-sized to Fortune 500 company needs to solve is the culture and really driving employees to be productive as opposed to them essentially stealing time and money and revenue from a company. Because I've seen that a lot in my career working with other people at large companies. So
Yeah, the company aspect, I think one book that everyone should read is called Ego is the Enemy. I think it's by Ryan Holiday. And Ego is the Enemy is a fantastic book, especially if you work in a group environment. Because if you know how to strip your ego early on and not take things so cold to heart, just understanding that people are just raised a certain way and you can't take that personally. You'll be able to endure these complicated situations that happen in your life and in your business or the work environment that you're in to sustain a great model for yourself. So I literally try not to get mad at all anymore. And I say that in kindly in the sense that I've had horrible things happen in my business in the past 12, 15 months where, people send the wrong invoices or transfer maybe $30,000 or $40,000 to the wrong vendor, right? And I see my customer service people do that. And I either can react emotionally and say, why the fuck did you just go do this, and get super pissed off? Or I can just say, what did we do wrong here today to make you make the wrong wire transfer? And when you position it like that, you're like, oh, okay, like he's with me, not at me, right? And
Mm-hmm.
he understands that like this is a collaborative effort. But when it's just like I'm above and you're below, and you're speaking to someone like they're below from you, they're not going to want to like incentivize themselves to like want to go grow a lot further with you in your business because they feel timid to want to go be able to express problems in the future. So I like to always think about this from a collaborative perspective, even if it's my mistake, which I take ownership of almost any mistake that goes on in any business that I do. And I'm okay with doing that. I really am, because that means my system is not strong enough today to go and scale something else. So I have to go fix that thing first before going elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Rule with collaboration, not with fear, right? Fear-based systems, I think, always break down in the long term.
Exactly.
And I think you made a good point too, you as a business owner, or maybe even you as an employee, if your boss is really mean or short to you, you may think like, hey, this is a reflection on me, but it really could be a reflection on him and whatever past experiences or how he was raised and all these things that are completely outside of your control. And so to your point, I think it's important not to get down on yourself or angry about the situation you are in, because a lot of it's outside of your control.
Yeah, it's an environment. It's key. If you do have a boss today and you feel like you're not thriving, you're just in a 3 out of 10 environment, and you probably have a 10 out of 10 skill set. And you have to identify that early on to know what type of environment and opportunity that you're in. I thought the reason why I went from a W-2 sales rep into going from W-2 to becoming a distributor was I thought that opportunity was just far superior, far inferior than the opportunity that I can go create for myself. So it really comes back down to if you scale what you're doing today at a 1 out of 10, where does it stand today? If it's not at least an 8, you're in the wrong opportunity. And you have to identify that as soon as possible when looking at any venture. And it's okay to jump into something and knowing the opportunity isn't that good and then shut that thing down as fast as possible. People are scared because they think that if I just started this podcast, for example, and you have no views and you're not it's not growing right now, but it's consuming so much of your time, it's making you upset with this, and you're not having joy of actually creating the progress, creating podcasts, it's okay to shut this podcast down and come back to it at a different time, because you need to go focus your skill sets on something with higher leverage opportunities. So identifying those things early on is very critical.
And how do you do that? I mean that it just seems like a delicate thing of like, okay, do I give this another month or two, or do I shut it down now? Like there's a trade-off of saying, okay, I'm quitting too early, or I'm jumping around too much, or sticking it out.
Yeah, that's a delicate dance. What I would do is always, it's easiest thing to do is on a whiteboard, right? Write out what it's bringing to you and write out what it's taking away from you. And if the takeaways are over leveraging what it brings to you today, then it's just not the right time. You know, you can only be good at so many things. I realize that, right? And you want to make sure you're putting all your effort to those things that you're very good at to give you systems to be able to go do other things in life first. So early on in my career, I had a curiosity chronicle in the sense I wanted to go and try a lot of different things. And a lot of those things actually failed. And I realized, what am I really good at? I'm good at speaking to people. I'm good at selling. I'm good at putting systems in place. And I want to utilize those skill sets as much as possible. So if I deviate from those skill sets, is that a good use of my time? Right? Like I started an e-commerce company, and I was very curious because I'm in the health and wellness space. And I didn't have a good operator in place at the time when I first started. So the burden came back on me. And I didn't have the time to go run the ads, put the landing page together, do the organic content. It was just too time consuming for me, right? So I said, I'm going to stop this until I find the right operator. And I'm totally okay with doing that. And you have to make sure that you are utilizing your time based off what your skill sets are to be able to go make sure that you are enhancing your lifestyle to the ultimate maximum because you're doing things that you actually love doing based off the enticing skill sets that you currently have today. It's a very hard, delicate dance to go back with every single day, but being able to make decisions quickly is probably one of the best features an individual and entrepreneur can have. Not in just dwindling down and taking a paper, cutting it down 4 or 5 different ways, and then trying to figure out if this is the right decision for you or not. Just make the decision quickly. If it won't kill you, it's better to do it fast rather than taking a long time to go do it.
Yeah, avoid the analysis paralysis. And I want to, as we get close to an hour here, I want to give you some time to talk about what you're building. And you said you're shooting for that $100 million goal. I don't know if that's the specific goal, but I know you're headed in that direction. And it sounds like you're building kind of a mini S&P 500. Correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm misspeaking. So I'm curious how you're expanding your opportunities and the opportunities you're looking at. Are you beginning to invest in different types of businesses outside of medical device, outside of multifamily real estate? Is that the goal here, is to look elsewhere, to diversify, to find other sustainable cash flow positive opportunities in this fund?
That's correct. Yeah. So I have basically a holdco of just businesses called the SP Ventures that we're investing in different businesses that we can optimize through growth levers that we built. So we built a sales agency that can do all cold outbound. That's all in-house within S&P Ventures. And we built a media company that can do all the creatives for any business that we acquire. So what I'm trying to find are businesses that we can funnel through those growth levers to allow us to have high cash flow margins to reduce CapEx. And then I'm creating MedVestor, which is a fund that helps medical professionals invest in real estate, where I have high leverage opportunities in the sense that I'm just the capital allocator. I am not the operator in any of these real estate deals today. I partner with the best sponsors to go and raise capital for them. And by utilizing my community of surgeons, PAs, medical professionals, medical device reps to be able to go do that.
Could you provide some examples of the types of businesses you're investing in that benefit from that creative agency and that sales agency that you've founded?
Yeah. So what does every business need? It needs more sales and it usually needs more marketing for the most part, right? So I'm heavily looking at things that have high profit margin today. And then all it needs is higher optimization on sales and marketing. So a couple that we're looking at today are even a mortgage company where they have great sales reps, but we can fine tune those sales reps by training them with our team in house. But they do no media content on them. They said, we just buy leads. We do cold outreach and direct response. But I said, imagine you had a unique opportunity to show your personalities as mortgage reps out there who are very personable. People got to know who you are, and you started creating TikTok to a page that started growing over 100,000 views organically because people love the way that you guys are running a TikTok mortgage business or a mortgage business on TikTok, I should say. Things like that. Even a great company right now I looked at was Pink's Window Washing. These guys are basically taking window washing and turning that into something very sexy. And they dress up in all these pink outfits. They have good media behind them. And they're going around Austin and they created this awesome window washing company to then go franchise that across the entire US. And I think that's so smart to take service-based businesses that are very unsexy and taking those and adding a little bit of edge and herbs and spices and then creating a franchise model around that. What that does is you create a roll-up opportunity to go be able to sell 20 of these window washing companies with an SOP built in place by the founder and say, this is what makes us different. And this is why our margins are higher. And this is why we have a higher customer base because I built this in proprietary motion that no one else has doing window washing. You see what I mean by here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I like it. Is service-based businesses, is that a hard rule? Like I will only invest in service-based businesses. And
I mean, right now we scrap around 400 companies a month. I look at those different companies and we analyze them based off of a few different metrics that we're somewhat proprietary to. I like service-based business because the opportunity to grow top line revenue and net profit is much easier than e-commerce and SaaS businesses. Those are heavy cash burn businesses. I've invested in some, I've created some, and I've realized you have to be okay with losing a bunch of money first to go and create a lot of wealth in the future. And if you're okay with that, those are great businesses to have. But for me, like going back to this, is being cash flow positive as early as possible does a couple things for you. It gives you mental peace in your life. And again, we're on this life for just so short. So knowing that you can start getting cash flow from month one is a very nice feeling because you start building momentum in your life. You're like, okay, this is starting to work. Waiting 10, 11, 12 months to hit the green on positive dollar is very difficult to incur if you don't have the mindset built up for that. So it just depends what kind of person you are. I think today, if we can build a lot more cash flowing entities first, to then go take on larger opportunities, going back to what I said earlier in the podcast, get a bunch of singles and doubles that start cash flowing you today. And then when you want to go look at some big company that's worth $50, $60 million, and you got to go put a ton of money in there to start getting that to $100 million, but knowing that it's going to take some time and you're not going to be cash flow positive, at least you know that you've built these cash flowing assets that are giving you dividends every single month first. That's my premise. Not everyone has to take those ideologies and use that in their own business. But it's just a way that I think that has served me to have mental clarity and mental peace in my life.
Yeah, I think it's really reasonable and logical, which I think when people think of startups or becoming a founder, or I'm going to launch this new Web3 or SaaS platform, you don't think about the R&D and the sunk cost and the long nights with no revenue. So I like it a lot. I lost my train of thought, but I wanted to ask, so are you essentially, you're identifying existing service businesses, are you purchasing a stake in the business and then they are given access to your sales agency, your marketing agency, and then therefore you profit by building the business and having equity in it and therefore pull out distributions as it grows?
That's correct. Yeah. So there's two models, whether we'll buy the entire company or we'll be partial equity owners. And then by them being able to utilize our leverage, our in-house leverage opportunities. So one example, funny enough, is I'm investing in a podcast agency. And this agency only does podcast services for large companies. Currently, she works with Shopify, Indeed, Alibaba, big companies. But she's a white glove service to go facilitate those companies. And all she's focusing on is a very niche avatar of Series A founders for big Fortune 500 companies to have a white glove service to launch a podcast agency, do the marketing, upload it to all the channels, and just not let them think about this in-house because that's an external expense for them. And they're okay with spending $7,000 to $10,000 a month for someone to handle that completely rather than hiring someone in-house to go do that. So she has a very unique model and a unique avatar that she's going after. And what does that do for me? It allows me to help her grow her top line revenue by using our growth lever services. And then me and my team being engaged with her customer base, which is a high net worth customer base as well. So those are smart opportunities to know that you're influencing the relationships that she's building and she's being able to use our assets to be able to grow her business. In parallel to that is a smart financial decision for us to go invest in.
No, I like it a lot. I like how you approach and think about the synergy and the deals. Maybe one final question about this. I'm curious. I don't know if you draw any inspiration from Alex Hormozi or if you think this, it sounds to me, you're basically creating your own mini private equity fund, right? And I don't know if you think in your network, if this is kind of a new trend with the ability to build a personal brand and a social media following and build that honey hole, that niche, and then expand from it. Is this something you're seeing a lot with your network? Is that everyone is building their own fund, their own, for lack of a better word, private equity company in their niche? I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, it is. And you can say Hormozi is actually the one who's the liaison for all this, but it's smart in the sense that it goes back to what I said earlier. Do you want to be compensated for doing, or do you want to be compensated for decision making? So when you can find the best doers and then help them continue doing the best things, but you're not doing the actual day-to-day doing, that's the best opportunity for you, right? Just putting the best people in place to go and execute and help grow their business. And you get a piece of dividend every single month, quarter, whatever it may be that you structure the deal. In my opinion, Warren Buffett owned 3 of the medical device companies I distributed for. He's in healthcare, he's in real estate, he's in multiple different platitudes, but he's not out there looking at P&Ls every single day and actually being an operator, right? Operator is a tough position to be. I think everyone should go be an operator at one point. But the ultimate goal is to sit at the top and be the decision maker, and the holdco model allows you to do so. So that's our goal.
Yeah. Do you think we talked about this a little bit earlier? I mean, everybody wants to be a solopreneur. So do you think there will become a lack of operators? Or I kind of worry about that, where everyone's like, hey, I mean, you make a really good point. That's what I want. I don't want to be the operator in there in the day to day, getting my hands dirty. So will there always be operators, or is that a fear that you have of everybody kind of having that realization, say, hey, I don't want to do the grunt work?
Look, man, there's a huge total addressable market of still operators out there who don't want to be solopreneurs. I think we're just seeing it from our context of what we see on media today. It's funny, like in the medical device world, a lot of our business is surrounded by trauma, right? But I'm like, well, cars are only getting smarter and the cameras are only getting better. Is that going to reduce car accidents? I mean, in hindsight, it's not. It is, but it isn't. You got to think about it. Like, there's just so much abundance of people out there. You should still be able to find great operators who want to grow a business, and you want to incentivize them to want to stick in that business, right? The one thing about solarpreneurship that I challenge many people today, if you are thinking about doing it, is are you just creating a high paying sales job for yourself? Because the ultimate goal is, are you able to sell what you built, right? You want to one day be able to go and say, I built this thing, and 4 years later, it's worth a 4 or 5x multiple on what I built today. If you don't think about it from this aspect, then what are you building, right? I talked to a lot of solopreneurs who've created great newsletters and created a great flywheel for themselves, but they're not sellable whatsoever. So they really have to go and create content and create newsletters for the next 30 years of their life to make sure they can go and survive this ecosystem and this entrepreneurship journey that they're going to create. So my whole premise is reverse engineering what you're trying to build, right? And hopefully that is you put the work in today and someone can buy you out for the future.
Yeah, I think it's tough, right? Because the personal brand is part of what makes you grow, and you as the face can help you grow, but then it can kind of handcuff you from an exit. And so I would imagine that's intentional in what you're doing, right? You post on LinkedIn, you have this newsletter, but at the same time, you're building this fund of real estate and companies that are completely separate from you.
Is exactly correct. Yes. I don't want to tie myself to the sales of anything I do anymore, because I learned in the medical device space, all the surgeons were very loyal to me. And that was a big problem. It's a good problem to have at first. You're like, oh, I control the whole thing here, right? But then I can never separate myself from the situation. Again, we're all trying to relinquish control. And the further that you can start separating yourself from the business, the more time you're going to have, which is what we're all striving for. If we can all sit on the beach and make a ton of money, that's the goal. And the only way by doing so is to have a great business that is not abide by you being there. And to know how to build that, you have to create great operators and great systems to allow you to scale. And that's what I'm trying to do every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's kind of a great closing note. I mean, easier said than done, right? Is managing people. I know as someone who in my 9 to 5 manages people, it's hard. People are hard to manage. People are not rational, unreliable. So easier said than done. But I guess I really enjoyed the conversation. I'll give the floor to you for any final words. Where can people find you? And hey, thanks again for taking the time. I thought it was a great conversation.
Yeah, I have the social handles: Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. It's the Sam Mahmood, TheSammahmood. Yeah, I have a newsletter. I'm raising for a fund right now for medical professionals investing in real estate, and I love buying businesses. So if you have anything to support me, I'd love to chat with you.
All right, Sam. Thanks so much. I'll put all your socials and link to your newsletter in the description so people can find it. Thanks again for taking the time. Again, I learned a lot. I hope my audience finds it valuable. And I wish you the best of luck. You're shooting for big things. I think you're going to do great things.
Thanks, Connor. I appreciate it.
All right, man.